Welcome back to On Listening. This is your host, Daniel Rosen. And I am lucky enough to be here with my cousin, Joanna Schubert, who is a music educator and a musician. And I don't know when this episode will air, but she'll be playing tonight for the second time at the Little Theater in Rochester, New York, doing a 2-hour set of her own compilations and some selected covers. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, Dan.
So glad you're here.
Me too.
Excellent. And I'm lucky enough that she's willing to go do a podcast recording prior her shows tonight. So I, not being a performer myself, I imagine that people are highly focused on their future endeavor when they're in a situation like this.
Yeah, but it's probably nice to kind of like have some time to just chill and think about, something as nice and meditative as listening.
I love that. So tell me about listening, and we're all interested in what you have to say about it. What comes to mind when you think about listening?
I guess when I think about my relationship with listening, I think about how highly attuned I am to sounds in general, which, interestingly enough, can be kind of distracting when I'm trying to do something like stay focused in a conversation and listen to other people. So I actually feel like listening is, there's so many different sides of it for me.
I can totally relate to that. We think of listening as all in the affirmative, all positive, if we'd all just listen more. But when I go to a restaurant, and I go to a restaurant that some Gen Xer or millennial is in charge of the music, I am completely distracted by the music because 99% of the time I haven't heard it. And if it's a good restaurant, I love it. And I'm trying to have a conversation with people. And the truth is, I just want to listen to that music that I haven't heard.
Yeah. It's really, really distracting to have music on in the background that you want to listen to when you're talking to somebody. And I also get distracted by the sound of people's voices. So you probably know that your daughter and I both have, actually maybe Lil does too, but I don't know, have ASMR.
You respond. So you respond to that.
So autonomous sensory meridian response apparently, and respond very positively to relaxing sounds and voices. So sometimes a person's voice will become just a sound and almost no longer belong to them. And for me, it'll just be like a physiological phenomenon as opposed to something with content.
It's a sensation. So you have a sensation. Well, I think, yes, listening is, initially, it is a sensation. You have an experience. And in my previous recording with Amanda, a somatic sex educator, I was positing that listening happens prior to comprehension, or the truest listening happens prior to comprehension. And you're describing how the sensory experience dominates the content of what's being said. Yeah. And I guess, I feel like I started to get really, when you asked me, I was almost caught off guard and I got really specific first. But if you're really asking me like what I think of listening, what I think listening is, I feel like to me, listening means being present. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what listening means.
Right. So it's no coincidence that I'm not blogging about this, but that I'm doing audio recordings with people, because it's the experience of people are going to be listening to this, a show about listening. And so you just described how you were caught off guard, which I think is lovely. That means that something happened that you didn't already have a category for. And the truest listening has to happen in a way that you're not there's no preconceived notion of what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. The brain, now I'm hoping to interview people who are more cognitive scientists on this, but the brain tends to categorize quickly. One of the great examples I heard is if you have a young child who's learning to speak and a dog walks by, they point at it and you say that's a dog, and they have a mental image of a dog. And then if 5 minutes later a cat walks by, the child is going to point and say dog. And you have to differentiate, because dogs and cats walking look very similar, but there's a subtle difference. And so that immediate attempt to categorize, that's what we do when we listen. So I love that what you heard defied your expectation of what you thought you were going to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you say immediate attempt to categorize, that kind of reminds me of like how people are in group conversations, how often people are waiting for their turn to talk, an immediate attempt to contribute, as opposed to being really present with what the people around them are saying. So as opposed to, let's say, really learning the difference between dog and cat, immediately thinking, oh, it's my turn to speak. Oh, it's now an opportunity, as opposed to being able to change your reaction or what you're going to say based on the group flow.
Exactly. So, of course, I flashed to a memory of why I wanted to do this podcast, and it was based a lot on an improvisational theater class that I took at Second City in Toronto. And in the class, you're listening. You did the best, or I should say best in air quotes for the audience. Improv is when you listen exquisitely to the last thing said, because that's where the fun of improv happens. The little slips or the little nuances that happen lead to new thoughts. But I had to suppress that to continue listening to what you were saying.
Yeah. Yep. Also, I like that. Listen exquisitely.
Oh, good. Good. I felt that the teacher in that class, I'm not going to say her name until I have permission to record her for an episode, because she's definitely one of the inspirations. But she listened and affirmed exquisitely. The use of yes was so incredibly affirming. But we'll get to an improv podcast and talk about that. So music. What happens to you listening to music?
Well, so so many things. I do feel like my response to music is definitely, it feels more like somatic and like deep down in my core than necessarily always an intellectual response. Although that certainly is there too, where I'll often know what's happening with music as it's happening, which will then lead to like my brain firing up. But I do think that mainly when I listen to music, it's a very, very, it's either like a warmth or like it's very emotional. It can be very emotional too. So it's either totally somatic or totally emotional, and my brain, I think, tries not to get too involved.
So are you suggesting it's an either or? You won't have a somatic and a emotional experience?
Oh, well, I mean, no, the two are so linked. So
those are the dominant things other than the intellectual pondering of the music. Yeah. So you also said that you suggested a similar thing when you mentioned the ASMR. That, did I get the acronym right? ASMR, right? It's super sensory.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that that's how I personally tend to respond to things a lot of the time. To many, many different types of things, whether it's sound or beautiful things to see or tastes or smells. I am like a very, very strongly sensual person. So that's kind of my automatic responce to everything.
I certainly hear that in your singing voice. Oh. There's a sensual quality, and we're both fans of Kate Bush, who what was it? The Sensual World. That's one of her songs.
Yeah.
So you use the word somatic. That is, you feel it in your body. You talked about a warmth.
Yeah. It usually it hits you right. It hits you right in the heart, where it is emotional, but it's not necessarily specifically emotional, which then feels like almost like just a physical response that could then lead to and maybe a memory of sorts, but it's not emotional in and of itself. It feels like it just comes from the body first, and then that will bring up other things.
I love that idea, that it's how we perceive things, and I wish I had more background knowledge on this, but the idea that we experience things, the modality we experience, whether that's auditory or sensory or in the body, olfactory, visually, and you're saying that sound and other things of beauty have a very physical experience within you. You feel it in the heart and in your body.
Yeah.
I think in my past, or even sometimes, in fact, I think as I grow as an adult, there's a part of me that yearns and craves for that somatic experience, to bypass the mind and just let something be incredibly visceral. Yeah.
Actually, my current voice teacher, who is really amazing and a very, very positive force in my life right now. In my most recent voice lesson, I was trying to learn, she was teaching me the words to this little this short Italian aria, and she was having me repeat after her, and I was having trouble figuring out exactly what sound she was trying to say, and I was like, wait, is it I or eh? And she was like, just listen and try it again. And I kept asking her, no, wait, but which letter is it? And she was like, okay, Joanna, it's okay if you get it wrong, but right now I don't want you to repeat after me in an intellectual format. I don't want you to think about the words I'm saying at all. I just want you to do what your body is telling you to do. And if it's wrong, that's okay, but I want you to learn it from a physical place. And I want you to, she kept saying, be like a rock. You are a rock right now, because I get very in my head in voice lessons.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a really beautiful way to think about it, was memorizing lyrics, not in this kind of crunch time way that I often do, but in a very, very physical, just letting it enter my body sort of way. And it just was a lot of repetition and a lot of different ways of saying the phrases. And I had absolutely no idea what they meant. And she didn't want me to know what they meant.
So you were listening with your body. You were attempting to listen with your body and then to let your body produce whatever it would produce.
Yeah. And that in her mind and in my experience and in my experience so far has pretty consistently led to a more liberated, free voice.
That's fascinating. I'm reminded of how I used to feel things more intensely in my gut. I remember as a teenager that everything had an incredibly powerful emotive and somatic, my stomach, my chest, the temperature of my body, my heart rate. And that I remember craving re-experiencing that. Like, if I had a sensation, was it retrievable under other conditions? Could I get that back? I'd find myself sort of trying to chase sensation. And also listening to that as being a more authentic response and sort of the truth for me, if I could, that would be sort of and it was all unconscious. I would never say it to anybody. I'm reflecting on it 30 years later. And that was, there was a truth in how my body responded.
Yeah. As opposed to like the layers upon layers of like conditioning that are sometimes I feel like I can't. Yeah. Like I can trust my body sometimes more than I can trust my intellectual mind. Sometimes, yes, not always.
Right. Sometimes the body says really dumb things.
Like, obviously not always, because that would be terrible. But that's interesting. Wait, so have you not thought about that in a while?
There's so many thoughts that I fail to listen adequately to. They arise in an undercurrent, and they feel really salient and important in the moment, and then they quickly go away. And so there's these historical memories of memories that will peak, I don't know how many times a year. My recall for how often I've had them, I'm not sure. But I know I've had that kind of thought in the past. But I never, not to recollection, committed it to a journal or to paper. But I'd say I have a lot of thoughts or opinions or experiences that when triggered by somebody else talking, they come more salient. I think that's also part of the reason for interviewing people about listening in this podcast is that my mind is very responsive. If someone said, Dan, that's a great idea, write a book on listening, I'd like fall face first under the ground. But talking to people, then reacting, what is that? What little tendril does that attach to? Helps me remember better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And that also says something about the merits of bouncing things back and forth with other people and listening, as opposed to just doing something on your own.
Right. It
sometimes.
would be an intellectual pursuit. It would be all the conditioning, as you called it, to try to write. I'd want to do research, and I'd want to, and which I might do, but I'd be pulled in the intellectual direction.
Yeah.
I'm noticing that you're finding the questions very general. It feels to me like they're broad invitations, but maybe specific questions are more helpful.
Oh, I mean, I can get as specific as you want me to get about things.
Well, so one of the reasons I thought of you, other than that I love your music and you're my relative, is that you had a vocal cord problem, which changed a lot in your life at the time. And I'm wondering if you could say something about that and what you learned about listening from that.
Yeah. We were talking a little about this the other night.
Tell people what happened.
Well, I got surgery in 2016. I had nodules on my vocal cords, so kind of liken them to like calluses on your foot or something, that if you keep walking on them, they're gonna grow and harden. So that's kind of what happened to my vocal cords. I don't know where they came from, but the vibration of the cords and their ability to close fully, which is the ideal, was impeded by these nodules. And then the more they hardened and the more they got bigger, the space between the vocal cords got larger and more breath came through. I was hoarser all the time, blah, 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 blah. And eventually, after lots of therapy, I got surgery, got them removed, and I could not speak I couldn't speak for 2 weeks at all, and I couldn't sing for 3 weeks. And before that, my ability to speak had been severely compromised for years and years. So I was always way more conscious than I had been previously, kind of like choosing when to speak. So I would not be on the phone as much. I would, actually, I don't even really like the phone that much, but even one phone call could like make me really hoarse. Or I would limit my plans or limit my singing or kind of limit everything. And I found myself in situations talking to people that I would just, I would speak a lot less, which I think inevitably for anyone, speaking less leads to listening more. And I certainly have found that with an inability to talk as much, I'm way more conscious of what's important to say. Am I saying this because it's contributing to something? Am I saying this because I really want to hear myself talk? Am I saying this and having and giving, others, giving others more space? And I mean, I actually feel like it'd be really good for anyone to not speak for a while, to kind of like reevaluate what's,
well, I'm doing
what's going on.
And in less than 2 weeks, I'm off to a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat where there's no talking for 10 days.
That's going to be pretty amazing. It'll be hard, I'm sure.
It'll be very hard. So you got conscious of what you say, which is sort of a kindness to the listener. You're by measuring how much you speak, you're thinking about what the listener is going to want to hear or what's relevant to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And did it change the quality of your listening? You'd said something about the tone, the quality of your voice, and after the surgery, how it affected your...
Definitely changed. And it was a lot more, I mean, for me, it was more pleasing to listen to experience, to share with others. I do think that in having an easier time speaking and kind of being more relaxed in general with my voice leads to less anxiety overall, leads to more room. I mean, I think that when I always had voice issues, I was always distracted. So I couldn't listen there was no way I could listen as deeply because I was constantly feeling tense and worried and anxious about, am I going to lose my voice completely? Am I going to be able to talk tomorrow? And even just, I mean, talking in general was just physically difficult. So I didn't have as much space for everything else in an interaction. Because I was so in my head about it.
That could be true about anything if someone's
totally.
worried about it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily related to your voice, but yes, something's relevant. It's hard to listen when we're paying attention to the background. So I kind of want to actually go back to the ASMR because I also have the, say it again. The
ASMR.
No, the full.
Oh, autonomous sensory meridian response.
I have that myself. And
I didn't realize that.
I think you were one of the first people to introduce me to it with the little YouTube videos and stuff. And so for people who don't know what that is, maybe we'll be lucky enough, and so many people do. Anybody under 30 knows what we're talking about. And if maybe you could give a little demonstration.
I mean, I could try. More so, I'm usually the recipient as opposed to the giver.
But if you were, so are you willing to give it a shot?
Yeah, sure. I could give it a shot. Well, okay, let's see. Well, people have different triggers for ASMR. So it's usually a physiological sensation of like warmth and like a tingly feeling that's caused by certain sounds. So one might be whispering, and it's especially helpful when it's from ear to ear or like in a focused area as opposed to stereo. Or it could be talking softly. Some people are into like little mouth movements, which some people also find it
salivatic.
A little, yeah. I mean, some people actually like to listen to people eat. And there's also, I don't know how well this will come across in this, but
a little
tapping or crinkling materials. Some people get visual ASMR.
Oh my God, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so a common videos are like graceful hand movements, and that'll often trigger my ASMR. But it's usually coupled with sound. But some people get it from just visuals.
Oh, that is so cool. So it's conjuring up this idea of synesthesia, which is formally, I think, when one kind of sensation, one kind of perception, such as visual or auditory, triggers a response in a different sensation.
Yeah.
So a classic synesthesia is that if someone sees or hears the number 4, that they'll see it in a particular color, or there's a sensation. So do you have any things like that?
I don't. I've always wanted to, but I work with a sometimes I play with a tap percussionist who has really strong synesthesia, and she'll often, if I'll play a song for her, she'll be like, "Oh, that was like a golden yellow sunrise," and then in the bridge it morphed into purple. I mean, she'll get very specific. So it's interesting how I have always wanted to have that type of synesthesia.
Well, you'll have to take LSD.
Yeah, I'm down. Do you experience that?
I do not have synesthesia. Okay. But when you talked, but when you were, the reason I brought it up is when you described how you have an emotional and a somatic experience to music, I don't think it's formally synesthesia, but I can relate a little bit to that. There is something that's becomes really dominant that's not about this. It transfers into some very deep feeling or body sensation that's not like, ooh, that's green, but it's not about hearing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, and I guess actually, I mean, so many things are, I don't know, would the adjective be like synesthetic?
Yeah, right. Synesthetic sounds good to me.
Yeah. So I guess it's obviously there's like formal definitions of it, but I feel like pretty much everything we do and experience is synesthetic in some way.
Right. It translates from. I think you're right, and that's what I'm. Yeah. That's what you brought up when you talked about the deepness of listening and what it does, and then how you have similar responses to beauty.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess how listening. Right. Can be in so many different parts of you.
Yes.
Yeah. Which, but I think that's interesting probably you'll find that interesting with the people that you interview, that probably everyone has like a primary mode of listening.
Yes. I'm sure that's researched. And I also want to hear what people have to say. Not every, ASMR is such a great example of it's a real phenomenon. Yeah. There's no question of it.
Yeah.
And I think it only became known in the digital age. I mean, I don't know if...
Yeah, definitely popularized at least. I don't know.
And I hate putting my foot in my mouth. I think that it's almost its discovery. This is where on a very unsure footing, almost couldn't have happened in a way until these ideas of recording and listening and the way people listen. But maybe it was documented, but certainly not popularized.
Yeah.
But people love it. It's the experience of ASMR is so powerful. I think it helps with sleep and relaxation.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And I guess that also maybe because I wonder if that calls into question what listening itself does to the mind and the body.
Yes. Right, because there's multiple tracks of what's happening when you listen, and I don't know what they all are, but one of them is almost the neurological part of listening triggers the ASMR. The person could be whispering bloody, deadly, gory things, but you're still going to have that response.
Yeah. 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 They were going to do it. I don't know if any study ever happened, but years ago, the main ASMR person, gentle whispering, a woman named Maria, her account is gentle whispering, was talking about a Dartmouth study that was going to be conducted with people, getting MRIs and watching ASMR videos to see the neurological activity. And I don't think there was ever
I'm going to try to
anything
follow up
done.
on that. Scribble down some notes when we're done and follow up on that.
Because I do think that, especially since it's becoming more popular, people want to understand what is actually happening.
I certainly do.
Me too.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And in a few hours, I'm going to see your show. And thanks for being a guest.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
You're welcome. And that concludes another episode of On Listening. Again, I encourage you to visit our website, onlistening.net, and subscribe to the show. Send an email with a question, recommend a guest, recommend a topic, ask me a question. Be happy to respond. As always, or at least for now, On Listening is without commercials. I hope to continue it that way, simply for the joy of recording this. Thank you.